Like, when have you ever seen a foreign leader just on his own voluntarily deny killing a major U.S. public figure? It's just a little weird.
Could we get back to what's plausibly real and not just like these made up stories?
They want this civil war. They want to pit us against each other.
Dave Smith and Max Blumenthal just ripped the FBI's investigation into the Charlie Kirk assassination, and in this clip, they talk about some of the inconsistencies in the FBI narrative and whether they think the kid they apprehended for this, Tyler Robinson, is the actual shooter of Charlie Kirk. So let's get into this. These two are awesome. Love this dynamic. Love this duo. Let's go. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
But then there is also another component, which is like there are some legitimate questions about the actual event, which are like, I've had a few different things that have raised my eyebrows while reading it. So in terms of the actual assassination, do you, I mean, I know you said in your article there's no evidence to suggest Israel is behind this. What are your thoughts on that? The people who are jumping on board with that conspiracy, and anything that is an oddity to you about the actual assassination?
Well, yeah, I've said that in multiple interviews too, that I don't have any evidence that of an Israeli government or Israeli role in Charlie Kirk's killing. I stick to the facts. That's why I'm still here. The reason that this resonates, the idea that Israel played a role resonates, is Netanyahu himself and Israel in general maintain power through lying, manipulation, intimidation, and assassination, especially assassination. And Netanyahu rose to power after the killing of Yitzhak Rabin, his main political rival, and Leah Rabin, Rabin's wife, said Netanyahu incited his murder. Netanyahu marched in front of a mock coffin that said Rabin on it just days before the murder. I mean, and then Netanyahu's coalition partners, Ben Gvir, et cetera, they are like the spiritual heirs of Yigal Amir, who assassinated Rabin.
And Yitzhak Rabin was calling for a two-state solution. He wanted to actually have a Palestinian state, one of the few Israeli politicians in modern days, in modern era, I should say, that called for that. And Max is right about Israel's reputation for assassination. They've had thousands of assassinations, and look at this scrolling leading up to the most recent ones in Doha. This is broken down by decade now. That's become something of a meme. There's so many Israeli assassinations that the Wikipedia site that cites them all has to be broken down by decade. So that is Israel's reputation. Max is right about that.
So this is like Netanyahu's MO. He just tried to assassinate the entire negotiating team of Hamas inside a U.S. ally. And Israel has global assassination squads. But, you know, what they would have done and what they were planning to do, and you could already see Laura Loomer rolling out the campaign, was to character assassinate Charlie Kirk if he continued to go off message. Yep. That's what they do. That's what they did to me. And, you know, if I got like an op-ed in the New York Times, not that I would want to, they would try to destroy my reputation. That's what they're doing to Candace Owens. Like, I don't believe they're going to send a sniper to take out Candace Owens, but I hope she has good security, because, you know, maybe they want to inspire some vigilante or something, but it's not like the Mossad's MO to go inside a U.S. ally and do this. At the same time, there's another reason why why people are spinning out their own theories. And I don't want to attack these people, actually. Like, I think, you know, people should be asking questions. We are not witnessing a credible investigation into Charlie Kirk's killing.
Yeah, I have to agree. He's right about what Laura Loomer says, too. She's in an all-out war with Candace Owens, you know, pleading with the CEI to essentially press charges against Candace Owens for daring to put the CIA logo on merchandise that says Candace Intelligence Agency on it. You know, don't take my word for it. Look on Twitter, man. The Zionist forces are all over her in this effort to discredit her for the things she said about some of the things Charlie was going through toward the end of his life. And yeah, Israel has a track record for nefarious dealings, especially assassination. So in one way, I see why people have clung to, you know, the worst possible scenario here that we see. But also, you know, Netanyahu hasn't helped his cause at all.
Starting with the text messages, the exchange between this shooter, Tyler Robinson, and his supposed furry trans lover, Roommate, they read like something written by a 65-year-old federal law enforcement officer.
That is
And the
true.
words being used are something I've never heard 22-year-old people using, even as a Gen Xer when I was 22. Nobody said, I'm going to retrieve the weapon from the vehicle and leave it at the drop point.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that, man. The vernacular seems weird to me. Some of it doesn't seem like, hey, a 22-year-old would use it, but I have no evidence to suggest he didn't use it. And it's the best way to destroy this entire case if they're fabricating these, because the defense will have subpoena power. But at the same time, I think Max's response here is interesting, because yesterday on Candace Owens' show, she said her response to the way that these text messages read was something from 1822. And there's a big difference between being from 1822 and being from a 65-year-old, intelligence officer writing it and scripting it. So I'm just saying, even people that doubt the veracity of the text have different angles on what they're saying. I know Candace has explored this in some of the subjects, saying she doesn't believe a 22-year-old would use the word vehicle, for instance. She's talked about that on her show. But, if these are fabricated, this is going to destroy the government's case. The defense is going to have subpoena power with this guy's cell provider. They're going to have the cell phone itself. They're going to be able to get these records from the provider. And that is the case whether this guy is iced or not, whether this goes to trial or not. The defense can clear his name, and no one close to him, including Lance Twigg, the furry lover or whatever. I don't know if he was a furry or whatever, but he was the guy in the process of transitioning. He has not said that these texts are fabricated. No one close to this guy's family or the defense have said these texts are fabricated. I think there's something telling there, even if these texts on their surface seem implausible the way they read.
Andrew Colvett yesterday declaring that there's no exit wound because Charlie Kirk had a spine of steel. That doesn't inspire confidence. He's told that by the ER doctor. And shouldn't the ER doctor be telling the media, or the FBI should be telling the media that that's why there's no exit wound? Why are we learning that from basically the spokesman for Charlie Kirk?
It also was like it did have a very like Ghost of Kiev type feel to the story. Like, I'm sure that makes some people feel nice, but could we get back to what's plausibly real and not just like these made up stories? But yes, I agree.
Yeah, man, I agree on that too. Look at this. Like, this is what he said. His bone was so healthy and the density was so impressive that he's like a man of steel. It should have just gone through and through. It likely would have killed those standing behind him too. I mean, they're going with the miracle narrative here, and it also contradicts some of the earlier narratives that they didn't recover a bullet. But now he's saying that they did recover a bullet. So where are the ballistics on that bullet? I hope that happens. I talked about on a different video how my friend said without knowing what kind of bullet was shot, we wouldn't necessarily know some of the things regarding how it would behave once it hits bone or flesh. And a lot of hunters can tell you that, once a bullet hits flesh, a lot of different things can potentially happen. He essentially doubted that a 30-06 round wouldn't go through someone, but at the same time, he said he's seen some weird things when a bullet hits bone or something. But that, there's been a lot of assumptions being made here about what happened or what a bullet couldn't or couldn't have done, and he thinks that until more information comes out, we can't really trust it. But that's where we're at.
We're hearing it was a World War I era, I guess Mauser rifle, and therefore it didn't have a serial number. Unusual. The removal of the camera from behind Charlie Kirk. Again, this is like what people are talking about. This is what the internet's talking about. I'm not just like trying to present to you the theory of the crime. But a staffer for TPUSA removed a camera that was filming behind Charlie Kirk, which would provide a lot of, I think, visual context on where the shot came from, and remove the SD cards. And Andrew Colvett goes out and says he did the right thing in the middle of a crime scene to remove the SD cards. And the FBI has the footage, but he's someone who loved Charlie Kirk. I don't know what the FBI is saying about this. There are so many other odd issues here. The photo of Tyler Robinson at the Dairy Queen 15 minutes after the shooting.
That's not correct. It wasn't 15 minutes after the shooting. It was actually time-stamped at 6:38 p.m. local time. That's Mountain Time. And the shooting took place at 12:23 p.m. local time. That's Mountain Time too. It was about 6 hours after, not 15 minutes later. So Max isn't correct on that one.
The comments by federal law enforcement that Tyler Robinson took 1 minute on the roof to carry out this operation, which I think would be difficult to do even for a professional sniper.
This is also not correct, and I'll show you why here. This is the indictment documentation. The FBI is going with the narrative that he got onto the roof at 12:15. Police reviewed surveillance from the camera covering the roof and discovered that it recorded an individual dressed in dark clothing cross the railing from the public walkway and drop onto the roof at approximately 12:15. And earlier in the document, it confirms, and this was widely known, that the shot took place at 12:23 p.m. local time. Charlie Kirk was shot and killed while speaking to a large crowd on the campus. That makes 8 minutes, not 1 minute. I love Max. His journalism in this regard on this story is fantastic. He's just not right about that. They're claiming, based on their narrative, that it was 8 minutes between when he got on the roof and when it carried out the shot.
And the jerking of Charlie Kirk's head, I guess he's according to the official version is he's hit from the front on the left side of his neck, but his head jerks that way. And so many people are formulating the theory that he was actually shot from behind to his right. And so we're at a point where anyone who's paying attention, who's paying close attention, who isn't like invested in the TPUSA MAGA franchise is not going to believe the official story at this point. And there have just been so many failures on the part of Kash Patel and the FBI as well. So the theories are going to continue to abound, and some of them will focus on Israel. And it really doesn't help to have Netanyahu go out twice, first on Newsmax, which is a vehicle for Israeli influence, taking money from the Israeli foreign ministry, and then on his own personal prime minister channel to deny killing Charlie Kirk. Like, when have you ever seen a foreign leader just on his own voluntarily deny killing a major U.S. public figure? It's just a little weird.
Yeah, that's an understatement. That's a little weird to come out twice in English recorded video, clearly directed to the American populace, denying that, when, it puts that on the table and has only raised people's skepticism, especially when it comes to Israel's track record for political assassinations. For that to happen is wild. What Max said about the back footage, some people believing that the bullet came from the back, he's right. A lot of people have, suggested that, made that claim, etc. I'm just going to say, the guy that had the TPUSA camera, had the SD cards with the footage, has provided that to Candace Owens. Neither of those two have said that they believe that footage shows that there's an entry wound from the back. But what Candace Owens did say was she didn't see blood coming from the back, and she would have been expected to. Now, I'm not, a master of anatomy, or, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a professional analyst in that way. I don't know whether it's plausible that could happen. Even if the bullet, if the bullet didn't pierce, it's likely there wouldn't be blood. But I don't know if you can tell from the human eye whether or not there would absolutely be an entry wound or not. But those two people that have seen that footage, which hasn't been publicly released, hasn't said that they've seen an entry wound from behind. They have said that there's not blood. And I don't know for sure. I think that there's much more blood in the front of your throat than the back of it, but I'm not going to speak to that because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a surgeon, I'm not a coroner, so I don't know, if it did pierce behind his head, which no one seems to be saying, including TPUSA, whether or not more blood would be shooting out from the back or not.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, that there is no question that's right. And there even for someone like me who's been saying, like, hey, we really shouldn't jump to conclusions, and there's no evidence Israel was actually involved in the assassination. I wouldn't be honest if I didn't admit that I do in some way think that they deserve this presumption of guilt that they're getting. And I do think you're absolutely right, particularly coming off of the heels of, which, by the way, ironically was the topic that got all these Zionist donors so mad at Charlie Kirk at the event, was that Megyn and Tucker were talking about the Trump administration burying the Epstein stuff. And off the heels of that cover up, it's like this administration, this FBI, this Justice Department just have no credibility amongst, their voters that if Israel was involved in this, nobody has confidence that they would actually get to the bottom of it and tell the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's more than that. Tucker even suggested it was likely Epstein was working for Israel, and that's politically incorrect to admit. He's saying this in his speech, and that it's not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. Well, those are two things that you just can't say to the most devout, rigid Zionist donors like Bill Ackman, like Robert Shillman, who Max Blumenthal just posted a piece on, had withdrawn his donations to Turning Point USA in recent weeks. So yeah, I have to agree with Dave there.
Look, to be clear, I don't think any of us should jump to any conclusions. And like you said, sticking to the facts, that's the best course of action here.
Can I make one other point?
Sure. Absolutely. Let me just quickly say that I certainly am not telling anybody to stop asking questions or to stop investigating or stop being suspicious. So that's always healthy. But yes.
That's my position too. You know, you guys have heard me call balls and strikes on this. I agree with sticking to the facts and correcting wrongs that I see, but I think that this investigation is way off track if you're expecting a legitimate investigation. I don't think we ever should expect that from the FBI after Waco and Ruby Ridge and COINTELPRO and Jan 6 entrapment and the Whitmer entrapment schemes. You know, this is a vile institution in so many ways, so I'm in agreements with Dave again.
Final point to you, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to do your own research. Well, I would accept that Tyler Robinson could have done this alone, and that he could have been motivated by Charlie Kirk's anti-trans commentary, that this was some kind of trans shooting. Like, there could have been a component of mental illness there as well. I can accept that. But does that mean that Tyler Robinson is a leftist? If he was on some of these weird nihilistic Discord channels, which are themselves penetrated or at least surveilled by federal law enforcement, was he a leftist or was he a Democrat or a progressive? If they could show that he was at No Kings rallies holding up signs like calling Trump a pedophile or something, then I'd be like, all right, well, there it is. And like, you know, the No Kings rallies went too far, you know, run with it. But the narrative is already set. The narrative is and this is what the Trump administration has been trying to do all along, is keep the United States in a perpetual state of emergency in order to expand the power of the executive and the surveillance state and Palantir to surveil us, control us, and consolidate the power of his very narrow sectarian movement. And this is the perfect opportunity for them to do it.
Yeah, I thought about that, and I'm not sure I totally agree. I do agree somewhat with Max, and but I'm sure that a lot of leftists, like a very small minority, would actually attend No Kings rallies. It's not like they've gotten to be, tens of millions of people at these rallies. They have gotten into thousands of people at those No Kings rallies, but that would be something even a niche of the left would even attend. He's right. We don't know a lot about this guy's political thought, outside of the fact that, culturally this does, swing to the left, clearly so. I won't mince words about it. If you have a furry trans boyfriend and that's just like a recent development that you're rebelling against, a family that is relatively conservative, it seems that is a leftist trait, certainly so. We haven't seen much on his political writings, but at the same time I thought about this and I'm like, what would serve U.S. interests more? Would it be for this guy to be a tranny? Would it be for this guy to be, a leftist in the traditional vein, like a Nancy Pelosi leftist or something like that, liberal establishment hack? But actually, I think it would have been more conducive to the government's case and the foreign policy, blood sprees that they want to spill and put the bill on us for, if he would have had like a free Palestine flag, or if he was like an actual anti-Semite. He actually had a lot of writings about how he hates Jews. I think that would be much more conducive to the Fed's narrative and what they want to do and how they could propagandize that and weaponize it against the public than if he was like a furry trans leftist. Of course, that does, I guess, encourage the culture war to continue. I'm not real sure about the Palantir connection between that and like a trans kid, But, I'm opposed to Palantir completely. They're a CIA-seeded startup that's trying to aggregate our data and expand the surveillance state, at the very least, by the way. But I'm not sure about the connection there.
And we have to be very aware of what's going on and question not just the official story, but who Tyler Robinson really was. Because when Charlie Kirk was shot at Utah Valley University, he was being protested by a group of progressive students. One was holding up a sign that said Free Palestine. Another one had like a pro LGBTQ sign. Another had a sign, maybe denouncing Charlie Kirk's comments on race or something. And they were interviewed by a pro-Trump videographer. I just watched this. I'll tweet the video out later. And he was challenging them. And they said, and they said that we don't hate anyone here. We still love them. We just disagree with them and think they're being misled. Then he starts challenging them on Palestine and Hamas. They condemned political violence immediately. They said, we just don't think like, we just are like, we want to debate this. That's really like the progressive left as I understand it.
That's the general rule. They're trying to paint these kind of people that do this as if they're anti-Semitic, that they're Jew haters, to try to trounce these legitimate protests against U.S. policy toward Israel. But Max is right. That is the general rule of how these protests, pan out. It hasn't been sold that way by the conservative establishment, saying that anyone that says Free Palestine is innately anti-Semitic. But he's right about that. That is the typical progressive bent, is that this is wrong. I'm not going to use violence. But, this is a catastrophe for the United States. Again, rightly so. This is an area where I have crossover with progressives that think that.
They're not really going to get on a roof with a sniper rifle and settle things that way. They're waiting for the next midterm election.
Yeah.
And that's who is being implicated as the killers here. We're talking about like 50% of the country. That's who Trump is implicated. And they want this civil war. They want to pit us against each other because what does Palantir's CEO, Alex Karp, describe as his business model? It's preventing social unrest from affecting or disrupting the lives of the 1% who sponsors him. That's what he openly said.
Yeah, I agree that that's their goal. They want us fighting each other on cultural lines like always. That's the case. No doubt about that. And they are trying to weaponize a collective guilt on the left. At least Trump did that by immediately after the shooting, before a suspect was apprehended. He said that Charlie was shot by the radical left. Probably about the worst response you can make. It's like, no, I don't like the radical left probably as much as he doesn't. Well, I do if you're a good leftist that's anti-war, but who he's referring to is not those people. He's saying that this was like a cultural leftist collective crime against Charlie Kirk. And no, I'm sorry. The radical left did not shoot Charlie Kirk. Whether you think it was this kid or not, it was probably a small group of people. And we don't have information, beyond this guy, concrete, that anyone else was involved. We have weighed some of that evidence. I think the George Zinn thing is crazy. The fact that this guy is going to say I helped the real killer escape, telling the authorities that, just openly. I mean, he could be mentally ill. He probably is, but a lot of mentally ill people would not tell them that. But anyways, this was the act of duplicity and evil by a small group of people, probably, right? But to push that collective perspective against, 40% of the U.S. populace is just absurd. And that makes up so many different cross-sections of people, most of which aren't violent, most of which even in the political establishment have denounced this and said this isn't the way to handle this. I was impressed by videos from Bernie Sanders on this, where he didn't even use it to further a gun control agenda, which AOC did, by the way. But yeah, that's where we're at. They do seek to divide us while they enact the same policies that have gripped the United States for the last decades. Expansion of the surveillance state, Max talked about that. The endless wars, the Israel first mentality, keeping AIPAC in control of our politicians with its immense influence over our deep state, our president, and our Congress. That is what they aspire to do. But man, there are some abnormalities in this investigation. There's no question about it. For me, it's the clothing change narrative has shifted from time to time. The gun disassembly and assembly narrative has shifted from time to time. They're now going with, well, he took the gun up to the roof with the stock and barrel separated. He assembled it there with the screwdriver that DNA was left on. They have that as evidence, they're saying. And then he never disassembled it again, where originally they said he assembled it, he disassembled it, and then he reassembled it again before discarding it. It doesn't seem to fit into the timeline, and they've gone off that narrative. The George Zinn thing is equally interesting to me, man. I can't lie. That is a weird thing. The fact that this guy, who is a gadfly, he's been at a lot of political events in Utah. He lives in Utah. You know, he threatened to put bombs at the end of the Salt Lake City Marathon in 2013 as kind of a copycat to the Boston Marathon bombing that happened in early April of that year, if you remember that. Looked into this guy, and he has some political history of injecting himself into like big violent things like this. But for him to go, you know, hours later, presumably, and tell the authorities that I was trying to help the real killer escape, that is just an aspect that it's so odd to me. It's hardly believable, right? And he's going to be released just hours later, but given a child porn charge because they saw his phone and he had child porn on it. But anyways, what do you think about this? Do you think Dave and Max are raising interesting topics about this? Do you think they're right about this? What's the most oddball thing to you in this investigation and most implausible thing? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Dave, check out Max at the Gray Zone also, and please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help us support this channel, and in return for that, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.